The European Commission has imposed hefty fines on Apple and Meta for violating EU competition law. The Commission fined Apple €500 million for preventing app developers from showing people cheaper options outside the App Store. Now, Meta has been ordered to pay €200 million for making its users choose between seeing personalized advertising or paying. Let's speak to Chris Johnston about all this. He is a senior editor with Business Insider in the UK. So, Chris, that certainly sounds like a lot of money for most of us. Is it, though, a lot for Apple and Meta?
Not for these two companies, no. These fines are really reasonably modest. They represent about 0.15% of both companies' annual turnover for 2024. So, they're really being viewed as a sort of a very, what the EU is calling them proportionate fines. In this case, they could have levied penalties of up to 10% of both companies' annual revenues, but they've chosen not to do that. So, we've seen a bit of a bounce in both companies' share prices today, which may not be directly linked to this decision, but these fines are the first to be levied by the EU under the Digital Markets Act, which predominantly sort of takes aim at the big Silicon Valley companies, which of course have plenty of users in the European Union. And the consensus seems to be that it's perhaps some attempt to not provoke further sort of retaliation or the ire of President Donald Trump by being sort of somewhat lower than these fines could otherwise have been.
So just to clarify one point, do these fines, you think, will they affect the way that Apple and Meta actually operate in the future, or will they just pay the fines, maybe contest them in court, and then carry on as with business as usual?
So both companies have sort of reacted quite strongly to these to the decision today. Apple says it will appeal, and Meta, has issued a statement saying that the decision represents it being forced to change its business model. The fine for Meta was concerned with the way that it was asking users to either pay a fee or receive targeted advertising, and that's that Meta is now saying that that decision is forcing it to change the way it does business. The Apple decision was to do with the way it blocks users from going outside its iOS App Store ecosystem. So essentially, they will have to make some changes. They've got 60 days to comply with this ruling or face the prospect of further penalties. But the decision's not, this matter is not really over, as you say, because they will have to make changes that they don't want to impose. So just exactly what happens next remains a little bit unclear at this point.
Yeah, and you've mentioned this being seen by some as the European Commission perhaps not wanting to invoke the ire of U.S. President Donald Trump. Do you think that this dispute over the EU Digital Markets Act will actually affect trade tensions between Europe and the United States on a bigger level?
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, Trump's tariffs obviously focused more on goods. These, of course, being services, which are a much bigger part of the global economy, but one that is not targeted by the tariffs. I mean, America has long been upset about the way that its companies, particularly the tech companies, have been forced to play by the EU's rules if they want to do business within the EU. Of course, it's even a bigger market, some 500 million people than the US. So it's not as insignificant for either Apple or Meta. They I don't think there's any suggestion that, that either company will stop doing business in the EU, but it does complicate the matter for both of them somewhat.
Thank you so much for speaking with us on DW. That is Chris Johnston with Business Insider. We have our Brussels correspondent, Jack Parrock, following this story. Jack, help us understand all of this. What exactly have Apple and Meta done wrong in the eyes of the EU?
So let me start with Apple. Firstly, what the European Commission is saying they have done, which is in contravention of the Digital Markets Act, is that essentially when a user or an app developer accesses the App Store, that Apple essentially prevents app developers from telling users that they can potentially get that app cheaper somewhere else, or giving them the information or the options to download that app in a different place. So it controls, according to the EU, all of the flow of apps through its Apple App Store. And it says that that's against the rules here in the European Union under the Digital Markets Act, and that's why they've decided to fine them 500 million euros. For Meta, it's a different thing. This is about the consent or pay system that Meta runs, which is across all of its platforms. So if you have an account on WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook, Meta says that you can either pay to opt out of it using your data to choose what adverts it pushes onto you across platforms. The European Commission says that less than 1% of Meta's users choose to pay. So what it essentially does is forces users to consent to their data being used across platforms for advertising. The Commission says that's against the rules here in the European Union and that Meta has to pay a 200 million euro fine.
So how exactly have these fines been calculated, and how much would you say they're actually going to affect these huge companies?
The fines really are pretty symbolic. They're not really going to touch the sides of the pockets, the very deep pockets that these huge big tech companies have. The Commission could have gone to a fine of up to 10% of global revenue. For Meta, for instance, that's about 160 billion euros per year. So they haven't really gone as far as they could. And there's a lot of questions about how they came up with these fines. The EU officials have said that there was no clear formula, but I think the way they see it is what is defensible in the courts should these companies decide to take it to court.
And that is the question. How exactly have we seen Apple and Meta reacting to this?
They're not happy. They're not happy at all, and they've come out pretty strongly. Apple has said that essentially the EU is trying to force Apple to give away their tech for free. That's what they said, and that none of their users have asked for it. Apple have said that they will appeal this fine and these rulings. Meta said that they've been even stronger. They've said that this is a political decision delayed because of the trade disputes between the EU and the White House, Donald Trump having put on tariffs, taken the tariffs off, and all of the tariffs sort of trouble that has gone back and forth between the two sides recently. They say that the European Commission is going beyond the letter of the law in the Digital Markets Act, and they say that the EU is now forcing Meta to change its business model 3 times. They're very frustrated with this announcement.
Well, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed with the latest there. We've been speaking with DW's Jack Parrock in Brussels.